My name is Jerry Gill. Today's December 14th, 2009. I'm visiting with Walter Adams in his home here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And Walter, appreciate you taking the time to visit with us.
Thank you, Jerry. Glad to do it.
As we talked about earlier, this interview is for the Old State Storage Project of the Oklahoma World History Program of the OSU Library.
Yes.
And I know that it's a source of pride for you and your family that your ancestors helped found the Stillwater community, and the two members of the Adams family, Arthur and James Homer, in the first graduating class at Oklahoma State University.
Yes.
Okay. But what I'd like to do is back up and talk a little bit about you first, okay? Get your background.
Okay. Very good.
Can you share a little bit of information about yourself, about where you grew up, a little bit about your early life, your immediate family, some of those things?
Sure. I'm one of the ones that were born and raised right here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Born in 1943, and attended public schools in Stillwater in my entire life, and was able to actually walk to campus to OSU, which was a very good process, because otherwise I might not have been able to afford to go. My family moved out onto the original homestead in 1950, 51 time frame, and that's where I remember growing up. I was actually at that time 6 years old, and just getting ready to go to grade school, and I had the great privilege of growing up on this farm that we still live on 20 acres of it. And it was a pecan orchard mostly, so I had free roam and free run of the farm, and could not have had a better childhood than I did.
Well, I guess this is probably obvious, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What influenced you to go to Oklahoma State other than being close enough to walk to school?
First of all, finances. Of course, it was very easy to go right here and not worry about room and board or any other things. But as you said, we have the unique history of having my grandfather's two brothers, Arthur and James Homer. Homer is what we called him, to be the first students to actually to enroll and to graduate. So I don't think there was any choice whether or not I wanted to go somewhere else. It was going to be Oklahoma State for me.
Wasn't much question about that.
No, there wasn't.
Well, did as you talk about being a member of the I'll say the historic Adams family, OSU Adams family, did that influence your decision? Was that important to you, knowing that you had that tradition in your family?
Yes, it was. We did not. I did not personally know my great uncles, my granddad's brothers, but certainly was proud, and the family always talked about Uncle Arthur and Uncle Homer, and that was probably one of the major influences to carry on the tradition of OSU.
So you never met either of your uncles, and it'd be your great uncles, I guess.
They'd be my great uncles, yes.
Never met either of those personally.
Did not meet either one of them personally.
Okay. Well, Walter, what was your major at Oklahoma State?
I was in School of Business, but economics was my major, and no particular reason. It was just convenient for me to. I enjoyed the classwork.
You remember some of the professors you had, and some of their influence on your development?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I still run into Dr. Steindl occasionally, Frank Steindl, and Dr. Sandmeyer, who eventually ended up, I think, as the head of the business school. But at the time I was there, he was a brand new economics professor, and other ones, but those two in particular. And I think the reason I remember them is because they're still around here.
So as an econ major, you had to have had the intermediate accounting classes and the beginning classes. Did you have any courses on Dr. Anderson?
I did not have a course under Dr. Anderson, but interestingly, you know, in Stillwater High School, there's so many college students that I went to school with his son. So, I knew of him, but as things turned out, I did not take a course under Dr. Anderson. No.
What did, kind of, we were alluding to your family earlier. How did being a member of the Adams family did it affect your perception of OSU and your OSU experience in any way?
Well, I think as we said before, it was the school to go to, and there was never a question as to where I wanted to go. I think the idea of the history and the historical perspective of carrying on the tradition and getting of course my sisters had also gone to school here, so I was following quite a few footsteps, not just the original two, but goodness, the family has spent quite a few students before me and a number after me as well.
You had 3 sisters, is that correct?
Yes.
Were you the youngest member of the family?
I was the youngest one of the family.
Did all 3 of your sisters go to Oklahoma State?
2 of my sisters went to OSU, and my other sister married an OSU student right out of high school. So she was probably the smartest of the bunch, but she never did get to go.
Well, I guess I've got to ask you this too. Did you meet Diane at OSU?
And of course, I met my wife at OSU.
Is there a story there, Walter, that you could tell us about?
There's lots and lots of stories, but I actually knew Diane's brother first, and we were fraternity brothers together. And I think that Danny was either playing a basketball game or a volleyball match, intramural, and I got to meet Diane at one of those, and we got together the last year in school together.
And where did Diane grow up?
Diane is from Collinsville, just north of Tulsa. And,
so you talked about your Danny being your fraternity brother. What fraternity were you in?
That was the Sigma Chi.
Okay.
And Diane was a Kappa Alpha Theta. So the Greek system is still strong in OSU. I'm glad it is, and had many good times.
Well, could you talk a little bit about your undergraduate experience, Walter? Some of the activities you're engaged in, some of the things you did.
Well, I don't know if I can tell everything or not, but
well, yeah, everything. Knowing this has been recorded, at least that part.
It was really a great time, as we had talked about earlier. In 1962, just had a new president for us, Kennedy, a young, dynamic person, and I went there with lots of hopes. So my social activities pretty much was with the fraternity. Not many scholastic. I was just a student to get in and get out, and that's it. And,
so you came in the fall of 1962,
yes,
the first year, and then you graduated
in January of '67. I spent an extra 6 months there. So,
well, can you talk about what maybe some of your favorite memories of your undergraduate experience at Oklahoma State were?
Favorite memories. Goodness, I think everyone was a good one. It's hard for me to think, Jerry, one better than others, except that obviously I knew when I met my wife that was going to be a special time with her. But the friendships that you make in school as you progress were always very good. But I couldn't say one was more favorite than another.
I think you did a good job picking up on Diane. Those were your favorite memories. That was pretty smooth. Well, looking back at your experience at Oklahoma State, Is there any events that happened? You mentioned President Kennedy, being assassinated. Any other events that you remember? Just not necessarily of that significance, but events, activities, or key during your years on campus.
I can't really say any specific event. As you progress through 1962 through 1967, and I think we talked a little bit about it, is that Vietnam became more and more prevalent as we progressed on from just a small presence in 62 until 67, 68, that we were very involved. And I think a lot of the questions about what we were going to do after we graduated from school were answered by Vietnam. You knew that you were probably going to get to do a tour and a visit over there one way or another. So that's probably the most significant thing that I remember about it.
Well, picking up on your comments there, Walter, can you talk about after you graduated in Oklahoma State, a little about your military career and then the rest of your life after that?
Yeah, well, I of course spent the first 2 years in ROTC, as we all did at that time, and after that I did not continue. So I really had no significant plans after graduation, except that I knew the military was going to be a significant part of my life. I just didn't know what part of it. And then I was contacted by my Air Force recruiter and invited to come visit with him. And as I said earlier, he invited me to learn how to fly over Vietnam rather than walk across it, and I took him up on his offer, and that started my career of 37 years of aviation, first in the Air Force and then with Delta Airlines.
A little bit about your career in the Air Force, the aircraft you flew that you piloted was...
started out in the C-141, which is a cargo transport plane, and we would probably make 3 trips a month to Southeast Asia and back, off and on, other trips occasionally, but it was mainly deliver goods over and bring whatever needed to come back. And I did that for a year and a half. And then got to train in the forward air control, O2A is what it was called, which is a Cessna 337, just an old push-pull airplane that they put a couple of rocket pods on, and you help the fighters find the bad guys. And I did that for a year and a half, and then came back into 141s after that.
Do you have any hot engagements when you were there in forward air control?
No, after all my training, they pulled 6 of us out and sent us to Korea to train the Koreans with airborne facts right after the Pueblo, and so I ended up in Korea for my forward air control time, which was quiet comparatively. Yeah.
Well, can you talk a little bit? So you were in the Air Force for 4 years?
5 years.
5 years, and then you got out.
Timing is everything, and for me, I got out, and the airlines had just begun to hire again as a push was coming along. This was in 1972, and so Vietnam had started to wind down at that point, and the airlines were ramping up, and got hired by Delta Airlines, and went to work in 1973 with them, and then retired in 2003, flying everything from a DC-8, which I started on, to a Boeing 777, as I retired on as a senior captain on a Boeing 777.
777?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
is that the one called the Dreamliner?
That's the new one. That's the 787.
Okay.
It will be in service next year probably, and I would have loved to have had a chance to fly it, but I leave it to the younger guys.
Well, Walter, can we go back a little bit and talk maybe about your family history? We alluded to that earlier about your great-grandfather, William H. Adams.
Yes.
And his wife, Rebecca, I think, that claimed a quarter section of land located in the current, southwest corner of Stillwater during the land run of 1889. Did you have stories from your grandfather would have been about how old at that time?
Grandfather would have been, about 20 years old, I think, when they made the run.
And his father was William H. Adams.
His father was William H. Adams. And the stories that we heard were that the grandfather, William Henry Harrison Adams, was a surveyor and had come and surveyed the town site of Stillwater, and we lived on Adams Street, and so we always thought, and I believe it's true, that as part of his surveying jobs, he conveniently made the Adams Street dead end right into our farm, and there's some history written by the great uncles, my granddad's brothers. What a great adventure it was that they made the run in they call it a prairie schooner, I think it is, which is one of the big wagons, and a 120-mile trek. And then once they staked the claim, then they had to make 3 or 4 runs back and forth, and it sounded like that if you were a 12-year-old kid to 18 to 20-year-old kid, you would have had a wonderful time going back and forth.
Now the family came from Augusta, Kansas area. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you hear any stories about? Did they make they fire the gun and they made the run? Were they part of that?
I never did hear that, and actually I've always thought that the movie footage that we saw was, and you're a history major, you probably know more. I thought that was more of the Cherokee Strip than it was the one in the first run in 1889. But no, I did not hear. I did not hear that, so I'm not familiar with anything other than they made that long journey south to stake their claim.
Do you recall if were there any friends or family members that made the run with them?
I do not know the ones that made the run with them. Now, the interesting thing is that we're talking about the Adams family, but if you talk about my mom's family, that both of her parents and grandparents, actually both her grandparents, staked claims, and so 3 of my 4 great grandparents were participants.
So there was a family element there.
For us, there was the Couches, the Cobles, and the Adamses. There was a homestead out to the southwest and another one to the south, and then of course the Adams farm that we grew up on. So,
which sort of brings up another question, and I want to ask you about. You're talking about the family members that are related, all getting claims in the same area. Do you know why they picked Stillwater, the area, and then how they decided which section they were going to try to claim? Did you ever hear any stories about that?
I never did hear a story. I don't know. I think that, of course, as I look around, that it is excellent farmland, and I think that's probably one of the priorities that they were looking for, good land that you could farm and prove up, and I believe that's probably what influenced them. I don't know, maybe the proximity to the beginning of the run, since Stillwater was right here on the north end of it. Sometimes you grab the first spot you can take.
Right.
I think my great-granddad, but being a surveyor, maybe had a chance to look and say, oh, okay, I think I'd like to take that land there. It's got water and good fertile land on it, but do not know for sure.
Well, the reason I wondered about this is because some of the boomer settlements that were in the Stillwater area were from people from the Kansas area, and sometimes some of them had been here or talked to other people and they had kind of scattered out and knew generally. maybe not specific junior where they wanted to go to try to find a claim. I didn't know if maybe you're.
I had not heard. I know the history of the Captain Payne, and but to my knowledge, and it would be very unusual for me to know, that did not know any of that that there was any communication back and forth, other than I'm sure there was different settlement areas there.
What could you go back a little bit and just in just general terms, sort of trace the ancestry of the Adams family? You know, how did they get to Kansas with their ancestry here in Oklahoma?
In
the United States.
I'm one of the really fortunate ones. We have a family Bible that has been passed on from my. I can't say how many greats, probably 3 greats, 4 greats. Grandfather, who was born in 1766, and presented the Bible to his eldest son to remain in the family forever, to be presented to the next eldest in line. And as it turned out, some 200 years later, I was the next eldest in line. So I received the Bible, and we have a lineage. So our family history that we trace starts in North Carolina, and from North Carolina they migrate to Tennessee, where my great-grandfather William Henry Harrison was in the Civil War, and actually was captured and was a prisoner of war. And then after that time, then they migrated to Kansas. And then by good fortune, the Homestead Act allowed them to come to Oklahoma and claim the land. And so,
do you know how did they purchase their land in Kansas? Do you know? Or
I do not know where they where they lived, or whether they had a farm in Kansas or not.
And I'm trying to recall if you told me your grandfather Walter Alonzo.
Yes.
At the time the run was, did you say about 20 years old?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And now, did he ever share stories with you? I mean, was he still living while you were alive, Walter?
He was living, but I was very young. I was 6 years old, or 7 when he passed, and I do know that he had a great love of the land. I think that's one of the things that we all share, is that he started the pecan orchard where there's some 300 plus grafted paper shell pecans on the north side of the Stillwater Creek here, and within the city limits now. But he grafted all of these pecans, took great care of them. Also, as a farmer, he raised cows. I think one of the things that was interesting is that he took some of his corn that he had grown to the Chicago World's Fair, or was it, maybe it's St. Louis, I'm not sure. Anyway, he won a grand champion for his corn. So he was a man of the land, I guess is what you would say. And my sisters would say he was very meticulous. He had a way that he wanted things done, and so he was very systematic.
Well, kind of tracing your grandfather's generation, that was William H. Adams, his kids.
Yes.
When they come here. Of course, we know that James Homer and Arthur both went to OSU in their first graduating class in 1896. But now, your grandfather and the other brother's name is
Oscar.
Oscar. Mm-hmm. They did not go to school. Is that correct?
No. My grandfather was 20, as we said, probably 21 by the time Oklahoma A&M was being established, and because he already had his basic education, and it was time for him to stay on the farm and work. And so, as I understood it, that he stayed on the farm and helped improve it. And then Oscar, he would have been the third brother of the 4, went to New Mexico and participated in a land run and a homestead in New Mexico, whereas Arthur and James Homer were students at OSU, and then I think they moved to Ardmore after graduation and started businesses of their own.
Can you tell me a little bit about your father? Would that be Arthur Joe
Yes,
Adams?
yes. My dad was just one of the good, hardworking folks in Oklahoma. He worked the farm as I remember growing up. After my grandfather died, his brother Willie is what we called him, Uncle Bill. Had 180 and my dad had the other 80, and we worked as pretty much just subsistence. We grew most of our food, and we had cows, chickens, a little bit of everything, and depended on the pecan orchard for a lot of our income. And my dad worked at both of the local creameries, which are, of course, now out of business here in Stillwater. He made the butter, so he was, like I say, just a hardworking guy.
Did he do the collection? Did he go out to the routes also, or did he just work?
He was in the factory. Yeah.
Factory.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and now, per our conversation, if I remember, Walter, his father had was it illness of some kind that your father come back to help him? Was that correct, or am I misconstruing our conversation earlier?
I don't know.
Your dad didn't live for a while. He didn't live on the land, and then he come back to help his dad.
Yes.
Is that right?
Until I was 5 years old or so, they lived in town. Different houses, different places. I was actually born in a house on Lewis Street, not at the hospital, but in a house, as quite a few deliveries were probably at that time. And then my granddad became ill with cancer, and at that time they moved back to help him, and then moved their house in at 12th and Adams, where it still stands. I don't know how much longer, but that's where I grew up.
And where was that home located? The side of that of the original house,
the old original house. The old original house. If you have to know Stillwater, but Blakely Street was the dividing line between the two sections, and it stood up on a hill, and it overlooked most all of the farm. Beautiful old two-story house made mostly from the lumber and the walnut trees that were native, and they actually went and cut them and harvested them right here and built the house with that lumber.
And that would be the address location would be what?
Oh goodness, it would be. I don't know how you 12th and Blakely. Yeah, 12th and Blakely. But then you have to go about 3 blocks to the south, up in the up on the just a little small rise there.
It's just about 3 blocks south of there. Then.
Yeah, off of Blakely Street. Now, if you're in Stillwater now, off of 12th Street, they are beginning to develop that property, and there's a beautiful new paved road that goes right up to right through the middle of where that house would have been, as a matter of fact.
Well, you and Diane lived on the property originally, part of the original settlement, 160 acres. I think you have 20 acres of that still, is that right?
That's correct.
Did you inherit that from your father?
I feel like it's an inheritance. When Diane and I were in Dallas, and I was flying for Delta, and I think 1978, and our son was just starting to become ready for kindergarten and first grade, and so we had a little conversation, and decided that it would be much better to bring our son to Stillwater than it would be to there you go, excuse me. Anyway, decided that we would bring our son to Stillwater rather than go to school in Dallas. And so we came back, and I visited with my mom and my sisters, and they agreed to sell me this 20 acres. So at a very reasonable price, I might add. So I feel more like it was an inheritance than a purchase, but I did purchase this 20 acres from my family.
Is it special to you, Walter, to live here on the original home site?
Every time I drive, every time I drive up the gravel road, I just think of my granddad and my dad and my family, and think how lucky I am to be able to live here. It still is a beautiful piece of property, and we sit right here within the city limits of Stillwater, but in a very country setting. So we have the best of both worlds.
A little bit. I was going through there. You know, you're one of the few. Your family, your father, your grandfather, your father, and yourself live on the property. The rest of them kind of scattered a little bit.
Yes,
without a total genealogy, but just, could you tell a little bit about some of the other branches of the family briefly?
Everybody has kind of drifted from one place to another, but the nice thing is we still have the anchor, and we're still the roots of the family, and almost everybody from the four brothers that originally homesteaded have been here at our house at one time or another. So they're scattered from Texas to mostly Texas and Oklahoma, I would say, is the majority of the family now.
I understand you have reunions occasionally, some of them here, but
yes,
about every 4 or 5 years the family gets together.
Yes, over 4 or 5 years, and mainly through my I call him my cousin Bob, who is actually second cousin, I guess, but he is a son of Homer. And Bob kind of gets things going, and said, okay, it's time to get together again. We just completed our last family reunion a couple of months ago, and we had probably, 40-some people. And that one was in Dallas. And
Can you tell me about the reunions, Walter? What are some of the things you do and you talk about?
Well, we always, again, are instigated by Bob. The first thing we get to do is introduce ourselves and our family, and tell what's been going on in our lives for the past 5 years or 6 years, and that usually takes up about half a day, and then the rest of the time is just what a reunion should be. It's sitting and talking, just like you and I are sitting and talking together, one person to the next, and finding out what's been going on, and become familiar again with things and events that have happened, and of course new grandkids, and new accomplishments, and new graduates, and whatever else it would be. So, yeah.
Bob, from your perspective, in what ways is OSU important to members of the Adams family? Is it significant to them?
Yes, it is. I think as we go right now, we have one member, that Travis Adams, who is going to be a graduate this May. So as you look back, there's almost always somebody that's in school, has been in school, and it's kind of a central theme to us. It says, well, who's going where, who's going to do what, which one is the next, and OSU has always been a major factor with us, and will be.
Is it a particular source of pride that you had the two brothers in their first graduating class in '96?
Absolutely, and I think that every student that enrolls knows that they have a little something to live up to. Is that okay? The goal's pretty high there. Your great granddad, or now it's great. There's 4 generations.
4 generations.
Yeah.
Is Travis the 4th generation?
Yes. Yeah.
You expecting the 5th generation sometime?
Well, it'll be a while back before the 5th generation goes. I'm sure there'll be other OSU families that will be or already have 5 generations.
There are not many, but some 5-generation families.
Yeah. So there will most definitely be. I've got 2 grandsons that I think
You're
we already
working on
started a college fund. Yeah, I can guarantee you that they're wearing OSU colors, and they've been up there. They've been at Gallagher and at Pickens Field. So they're going.
You got this fund for them, Walter, and they can leave where they want to go, but to go to OSU, you let them use money out of the fund.
That's right. Exactly.
Did you have any idea about how many members of the family over the years, starting with Homer and Arthur, how many members have attended Oklahoma State?
That was one of my projects that I went through when I knew you were coming, and now this is not absolutely accurate, but I think the last count was around 41. 41, and out of those, I couldn't tell you the graduates, but most of them went on to graduate. There's a majority of them went on to graduate.
Walter, another question I want to ask, kind of along the same lines, is can you talk about a little bit about some of, I'm going to phrase this correctly, are there some members that stand out in the family that have done something significant? I know every member has done something significant, but is there some things that are particularly memorable? Some members of the Adams family that you could point to?
Well, it all depends on what you say is significant. I think just getting out there and having a career is significant. But I'm sitting here with my nephew, my sister's son, that we were visiting, and he worked, goodness, 20 years plus ago on wind turbines and electrical generated power. And a great engineer that he was in aviation in the engineering part of it, and I was in the flying part of it. And yet, as I talked to him, he has developed a flight management system that's, as he said, that his system was used by the Lockheed Electra that reenacted Amelia Earhart's journey around the world, except that she used his GPS flight management system to get around, where she would absolutely know where she is. So yeah, there's gobs of accomplishments, but any beacon, I don't know if there's any thing that stands out other than raising a good family and being a good person.
You know what your grandkids do now? Your 2 kids went to Oklahoma State, is that correct?
Yes, they did. My son has been married now a little over 10 years, and a daughter just married, so no grandkids there yet. But grandsons are just 6 and 3, so they've got a long ways to go. But the nice thing is both sets of grandparents. Son married his high school sweetheart, so both sets of grandparents are right here in Stillwater, so we get to share. And so there's not many visits that both sets of grandparents are together, and that always includes OSU football games, basketball games, you name it, and they'll be up here for the games, and the grandkids, like I say, are getting the early indoctrination.
Well, Walter, if you look back and thought about what do you feel is the legacy of the Adams family in terms of Oklahoma State University?
Well, I think if my legacy is, it was by being a land grant school, it was a place that I could go, get my education, pursue my business, as it happens to be, it was aviation for me, but OSU was accessible to everyone, and that probably was the most important thing to me. And as our families have attended school, it's paid us back 10 times over.
You feel a special sense of belonging to Oklahoma State University, 4 generations, and you say 40 some odd individuals that have gone to Oklahoma State.
Oh yeah, I do. Although I don't know any one of us that really has gone to school and with that in mind. I certainly didn't tell any of my professors that my great granddad or my great uncles were were the first students. Yeah, I think we're all humbled by the fact that they were the first students, but I think each one of us wants to accomplish things on our own, and that part of it is semi-private. So.
Well, as a graduate of Oklahoma State University, are you proud of the things you've seen happening in the campus nowadays, the master plans and things that are going on?
Just amazed, yeah. Every time I go through, of course, the university, the Boone Pickens Stadium is probably the most obvious thing, but as you go on campus, and this is one of the things that when we moved back that we enjoyed so much is that there's so much available to the folks in Stillwater. And you've got the Allied Arts programs. OSU's always has some musical program, some program going forward. But the construction that's going on, the new buildings, the new architectural building that's just opened, everything. It does make you proud to see the progress and look forward to what's going to happen next.
And the Adams family display in the Alumni Center is pretty prominent too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we really had a good time working with you on that. And as I said, my nephew has had a significant input into the genealogy of our family and what has gone on there. And the Alumni Center, of course, is beautiful.
Well, is there anything we haven't talked about, Walter, you'd like to, kind of your feelings about Oklahoma State University or your family? I know you're one of the historians, and certainly you have a lot of historical documents of the Adams family. Yeah. If we were looking at here just previous to interview, any comments about the family, about Oklahoma State University? Is anything we haven't discussed you'd like to bring up?
I think that you've done more than a good job of getting everything out of me, everything out of me that you can. I can't, as I say, I'm humbled every time I come to the house and am able to look out my window and think, my goodness, my grandfather and my dad and my great grandfather have preserved this land that we get to live on, and I hope that eventually somebody else will get to live on it. And as I go up on campus, I kind of think of the same thing, is that without our previous generations that have worked so hard to make the university function and work, that I know that the next generations are going to be that much more appreciative as well.